I'm a 22-year-old woman who inherited the house I grew up in from my mom after she passed away last year at 47 from a sudden stroke. I've come to terms with her passing. My parents divorced when I was 7, so I split my time between my mom and dad. I was always closer to my mom because she understood me, while my dad, now 50, was often too busy with work or women to give me much attention. As long as I had my mom, I was okay with it. After I turned 18 and started college, my dad moved to Houston for work, so we only saw each other during the holidays. 2 years ago, he brought his girlfriend, Julia, and her 2 daughters, 18 and 16, to spend Christmas with us. It was surprising since he'd never introduced any girlfriends to us before. We welcomed them warmly, and everyone got along well. Even after that, Julia was always sweet to me on the phone, though her daughters were shy and kept to themselves. When my mom passed, she left the house to me. She had wisely divided her assets in her will when I turned 18, always planning ahead. After graduation, I decided to move into the house and find a local job, wanting to stay in my childhood home for a while. My dad wasn't happy about my mom's decision and made sure I knew it. He and Julia had been supportive during the funeral, but he became morose once he realized he wasn't getting the house back. This house was where my parents lived when they first got married, but my mom took it over during the divorce, which I think was fair since my dad didn't have to pay alimony. Mom gave up her career to raise me, letting my dad focus on his job. She worked hard to make sure I never felt neglected. I thought it was unfair for my dad to be upset about not getting the house back, and though he didn't say much, his behavior showed his displeasure. At the time, I didn't care. I was still grieving my mom, so my dad being annoyed about her will was the least of my worries. She left him all her wedding jewelry and the gifts he gave her, which should have been enough for him. He went back to Houston with Julia a few weeks after the funeral, and I've been living on my own since. About 6 months ago, my dad told me he was engaged to Julia and wanted to get married here. He planned to come back for the weeks leading up to the wedding, staying in the house rather than a hotel. Their daughters were homeschooled, so that wasn't an issue. I agreed to let them move in with me because I was tired of living alone, and I got along well with Julia. Plus, my dad promised to split all the bills. They moved in a month ago, and it was nice having them around. I felt less lonely and thought I could get used to it. I even dreaded the day they'd leave because I didn't want to be alone again. But 2 weeks ago, 3 days before the wedding, my dad asked if they could move back here permanently. I was surprised, but he explained he wanted to ease me into the idea of being part of a family and didn't like me living alone. I wanted to say yes immediately, but his behavior about not getting the house back made me hesitate. As much as I liked the idea, I didn't think it was wise to make a quick decision. I needed time to think. It felt logical to wait and not act on my emotions. I told him I needed more time and would let him know after the wedding. He looked annoyed but didn't push it. 10 days ago, they got married, and we had a blast at their wedding. They were supposed to stay a few more days before moving back, so I was preparing to tell them my decision, which was a yes. But before I could, they all took off on their honeymoon without telling me. 2 days after the wedding, I woke up alone. Their belongings were still here, so I tried calling them, but nobody answered for hours. Finally, around noon, Julia called back and casually informed me they had left for their honeymoon and would be back in a week. I was stunned. I expected them to at least tell me or include me in their plans. I asked why they hadn't told me, and she gave a lame excuse about forgetting but assured me they'd be back soon. I tried to explain that my issue was with them leaving without a word, but she brushed it off, saying my dad was busy and didn't have time to talk. I kept my cool and asked her to let me know when my dad was available. Her tone changed, and she became snarky, saying my dad was busy for the next few days and I shouldn't bother them. She told me not to act hysterically just because I felt left out, reminding me I wasn't a child anymore and needed to accept that my dad had a new family. She wanted me to get over it and clean the house before they returned. I was furious. I decided not to call my dad and was grateful I hadn't agreed to let them move in before seeing this side of Julia. There was no way they were living with me anymore. I packed their belongings as haphazardly as I could, stuffed them in cardboard boxes, and left them in the yard. I didn't care what happened to their things. They didn't belong inside my house. Yesterday, they came back from their honeymoon. Luckily, I was at work when they found their stuff in the yard. I had changed the locks, so they couldn't get in. My dad was extremely pissed when he contacted me about it. He told me I was being a brat and overreacting, claiming they did nothing wrong. I told him to take their boxes and leave, and if they were on my property when I got home, I'd call the police. He cursed and hung up. I had to get back to work and couldn't waste time worrying. When I got home, their things were gone. I thought it was over, but around midnight my dad called. Julia apologized, saying she wanted to make amends and didn't want bad terms over something petty. I told her to shut up and leave me alone. Her sudden change felt fake, clearly driven by not being allowed to live with me anymore. If she had any regrets, she would have apologized sooner, not after their vacation. My dad wasn't sorry either. He tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was heartless for not letting them stay, offering to split bills. He claimed he wanted to live here to feel closer to my mom. Julia's outburst was just a bad mood, he said, and even her kids missed me. But I wasn't having it. I knew my dad had his eye on this house since the divorce, and after seeing Julia's true colors, I didn't want to risk it. I told him they could go back home. He started bawling, accusing me of being selfish, saying I was ruining his happiest memories. He called me petty and mean, saying my mom would hate this side of me. But I stood my ground. I wasn't letting them move back in after Julia's rudeness and their lack of consideration. Update. The comments on my original post were a reality check. Some were rude, but I got the point. I stuck to my decision. My dad doesn't deserve to live here after being awful to me. It was nice while it lasted because they were sweet initially, but their true colors showed once I said I needed time to think. They thought they could intimidate me, but I'm not that weak. I'd rather be lonely than spend time with the wrong people. I shouldn't have let them come here at all. My dad's reaction when he learned the house was mine should have been a red flag. It showed me how materialistic and selfish people can be. As for Julia, I'm glad she picked a fight with me and messed things up for herself. If she hadn't, we might have ended up as a happy family, but I won't fall for their fake behavior again. I was lonely, missing my mom, and with no grandparents left. I needed a family for support, but these people aren't it. I'm relieved I realized this before it was too late. It's been a few days since they left, and my dad keeps calling and texting, hoping for another chance. But they don't deserve it. They blew their one shot, and I can't risk giving them another. I feel bad treating my dad like this, but he never put in much effort with me. He doesn't get to complain now that I'm making decisions for myself. Update. My dad's desperate to move in because he lost his job months ago. He spent all his savings on the wedding and honeymoon. Julia quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom, so now they're broke. My dad assumed I'd let them stay. Julia didn't know the truth until recently, which is why she apologized. She's as fake as they come, but that's what my dad deserves. Today, my dad asked to stay a few days until he finds a job. I told him no. They've been nasty to me, and I don't need that negativity. He should have known better than to splurge on a wedding and honeymoon without a job. That's not my problem, and I refuse to feel guilty. I texted him back, explaining this politely. He took it as mockery and said I'd suffer for what I was doing. I didn't respond because anything I say will be turned against me. It's better to let him wallow in his misery. It's not my problem anymore. Update 3. My dad decided to leave the city today, but couldn't do it silently. He made sure to let me know what a huge disappointment I am as a daughter. He and his wife had to make a whole scene out of it. I last spoke to him about 3 weeks ago, but we didn't check in with each other after that. Today, both he and Julia texted me, saying they were delighted to announce that Julia's ex-boyfriend decided to sponsor their trip back home. Apparently, he realized he needed to see his daughters. Julia had full custody, and her ex paid child support, but was too busy to spend time with his kids. He waited for Julia and my dad to sort things out, but finally decided to step in himself. They didn't give me all the details. They posted a picture of their daughters with Lucky Charm and 4-leaf clover stickers. I can guess the real story behind Julia's ex's sudden epiphany and why he's funding their trip. Julia's manipulation and stubbornness likely played a role. I've seen that side of her before. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm just relieved they're leaving. This will be the last I have to deal with them. Reading other people's stories about their crazy families made me realize I had it easy. My dad is too worried about his reputation to harm me. He knows I call the cops without hesitation. Plus, I have enough training to defend myself. With them gone, I have even less reason to worry. I still feel lonely sometimes, but instead of dwelling on it, I go to my friends. After my mom passed away, I shut everyone out without realizing how alone I'd become until I read the comments here. It's going to take time, but I'm going to make the best of my life now. I have a stable job, a decent income, and my own house, thanks to my mom. I have great friends who care about me. Honestly, what more do I need? If I get into trouble again, I'll just come back here. I'm sure the wonderful people on Reddit will